the whispers in the walls. Ilara lived in a house that breathed. At night, when the sun dipped below the horizon and the streetlights flickered to life, the floorboards began to groan. She sat on the edge of her bed, clutching her pillow tightly. Every sound felt like a heavy footstep coming closer to her door. She wasn't afraid of the dark itself, but of what the dark hid in the corners of her room. The hallway was the worst part. It was a long, narrow throat that connected the rooms of the house. Ilara stood by her door, peeking through a tiny crack. She saw a flicker of movement near the stairs, a tall, spindly shadow that didn't belong to any furniture. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. "It's just the house settling," she whispered, but she didn't believe her own words. She retreated back to her bed and pulled the heavy duvet over her head. The fabric was a thin shield against the unseen. Under the covers, the air was warm and smelled of laundry detergent, but the silence outside was even scarier than the noise. She felt as though 1,000 eyes were watching her from the gaps in the floorboards and the vents in the ceiling. Suddenly, a sharp scratching sound echoed from the other side of her bedroom door. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't a branch hitting the window. It was rhythmic, 3 slow scrapes against the wood. Ilara froze. The monster was no longer in the hallway. It was right there, separated from her by only an inch of oak. Her breath caught in her throat, and the room felt icy cold. She had spent weeks hiding, but tonight felt different. The fear was exhausting. Ilara reached out and grabbed the heavy metal flashlight from her nightstand. Her hand shook, but her grip was firm. She realized that the monster fed on her hiding. If she wanted the scratching to stop, she had to see what was making it. She took a deep breath, clicked the light on, and walked toward the door. Ilara flung the door open. The beam of her flashlight cut through the darkness of the hallway, landing on a tall, shifting shape. It looked like a person made of smoke, with long, tattered limbs that seemed to dissolve at the edges. It didn't have a face, just a hollow space where a head should be. It didn't attack. It simply stood there, swaying like a tree in a storm. Instead of screaming, Ilara took a step forward. She looked directly into the hollow space of the creature. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice trembling but clear. "Why are you following me?" The shadow didn't move. It seemed to pulse with a low, vibrating hum. Ilara realized the monster didn't look angry. It looked sad. It looked as heavy as the secrets she kept and as dark as the worries she felt every day. She lowered her flashlight and closed her eyes. She stopped looking at the hallway and started looking at her own heart. She thought about her stress at school, her loneliness, and the things she was afraid to say out loud. She felt those feelings inside her, and they felt exactly like the monster. When she opened her eyes, the tall, terrifying shadow had shrunk. It was now no bigger than a small dog, sitting quietly on the carpet. "You're just me," Ilara whispered. She reached out and touched the mist. It wasn't cold or sharp. It felt like a soft breeze. She understood that the monster was just her own anxiety, taking shape because she tried to ignore it. By looking at it and naming it, the fear lost its power. The small cloud of smoke drifted toward her and settled into her chest, no longer a weight, but a part of her she finally understood. The house was quiet now. The floorboards didn't groan, and the walls didn't whisper. Ilara climbed back into her bed, but this time she left the duvet folded at her waist. She stared at the ceiling and smiled, feeling the vast, calm space of the room around her. She wasn't alone, but she wasn't afraid. She had turned the lights on inside herself, and the monsters had nowhere left to hide.